Good evening, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Nice to see everybody, and welcome to those who are live streaming. As I'm sitting in my seat for the first half of the service and looking around, it occurs to me, it probably does to you too, that the beauty of the outside with which we have such intimacy with the wonder of these many windows complements the beauty and the warmth of inside. Really, inside and outside complement one another and add to the joy of our time together. I hope you feel that as I do. Well, we are now in the 8th Torah portion of the book of Leviticus's 10 portions, 2 away from the end. And for those of you who do not love the book of Leviticus, you'll be happy to know that the 2 final portions are combined next week. So we don't have to wait until a 3rd week to get to the next book of the book of Numbers. For those of you, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, who along with me love the book of Leviticus, are going to be sorry to see it go. But one of the wonders of our Jewish tradition is, once we leave it, we know we're coming back to it next year. All 10 portions, one can hope, over 10 weeks and not 9. Well, in our Torah portion for this week and more, from Leviticus chapter 22, we have a verse that is really remarkable in its audacity. And I want to read it to you, and then I want to think about it out loud. Here's the verse. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am the Lord. You shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. The verb sanctified is in the passive voice. That I may be sanctified by you. The you here, contrary to what we might expect, which is a book that focuses on the priests, the leaders of the worship, the you here is the people of Israel, all the people, including us. You shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. And a midrash draws out some of the astonishing, really, implications of this idea. On the verse, you are my witnesses, says the Lord, that I am he. The midrash says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, if you are my witnesses, I am God. If you are not, as it were, I am not God. It's up to us to sanctify God. Now, the verse doesn't say sanctify God, it says sanctify God's name. God is inherently, objectively, eternally sanctified. But God's name is something we have control over. And if we don't sanctify God's name, God, as it were, in the Hebrew, kivyachol, if I could really say so, God's name is not sanctified. How, the Midrash continues, can we carry out this awesome task of sanctifying the name of God? We, finite, mortal creatures who are here but for a moment in the vast eternity that preceded us and will follow us. How can we sanctify God's name, or the supreme source of sanctity itself? God's name, I want to suggest, is the way in which God's name is used in the world. That is God's reputation. God's reputation is caught up in the idea that there are perennially supreme values, that there are objectively correct actions, that there are worthy goals. The goal is, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Our vocation is to climb the ladder of holiness toward God, whose name we carry through our actions. How can we carry out this awesome task of sanctifying the name of God, of being a witness to God's existence and sovereignty? And I'm suggesting to you that God's sovereignty is to be recognized in the presence of values, which we, through enacting those values, make real in the world. And when we make them real, we make God's name, the source of values, real. How can we carry out this awesome task of sanctifying the name of God, being a witness to God's existence and sovereignty? The answer is through our actions. And I want to take as an example the very famous maxim, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. What does it mean to love our neighbor? We think of love often as an emotion, as the pitter-patter within our hearts. Here's Maimonides on the meaning of this action. Maimonides offers practical advice on how loving one's neighbor is to be fulfilled. He does not write about actually loving or even liking the other person. Rather, Maimonides instructs us on how to behave toward others, speak well of them, be concerned for their property, as we would like them to be concerned with ours. Or from the end of his vast Mishnah Torah in the 14th volume, the following Maimonides says, positive commands are implied in loving your neighbor. Visiting the sick, comforting the mourners, causing the bride and the bridegroom to rejoice. These constitute deeds of loving kindness performed in person, for which no fixed measure is prescribed. And they are implied in the precept, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I happened to see a review in the New York Times just this past Wednesday, a review with the title, An Ordinary Woman with Immense Courage, which is a new series, an 8-part series, I think, which tells the story of Miep Gies, who helped to hide Anne Frank and her family from the Nazis. That moment and much more about Gies's life and heroism is at the center of A Small Light, a new 8-part series that tells the story of Gies and her husband Jan, and their involvement in the Dutch resistance efforts during World War II. When in 1942, I'm reading from this article, Otto Frank asked Gies to help him hide him, his daughters, Anne and Margot, and his wife Edith, in an annex in their office, Gies did not hesitate before saying yes. She had no idea what she was saying yes to, and then she had to keep saying yes for 2 years, putting herself in grave danger. This was until the day in August 1944 when the Nazis raided the office and found 8 people, the Frank family and 4 others, hiding in the annex. In this series, A Small Light, Giese's decision to help despite the dangers and disruption this posed to her life, she kept the secret, she brought food and books and more. Her decision to help despite the dangers and disruption this posed for her life, her unwavering spirit, her reluctance to be seen as a hero, make the viewer ask, what would I have done in that situation? The show's title is taken from a quote by Giese. Even a regular secretary, a housewife, or a teenager can turn on a small light in a dark room. The moral question at the heart of Giese's story is whether to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing or to do nothing, has become in our own day even more important given how war, nationalism, and anti-Semitism once again spread across Europe. As paradoxical as it may sound, by Giese's actions, which embody love your neighbor as yourself, Giese sanctified the name of God and made what God stands for present, poignant, imperative in our world. We, finite, limited, fragile human beings, have the vocation, we are called to sanctify God's name. The Mighty One, the supreme being in the universe, waits for us to bring God's name in the world. Or as I might try to put it spatially, when we think of biblical religion, that which is above first sends imperatives which we are called to carry out. This passage reverses the order. The high depends on the fragile. First we act, then God's name is brought into the world. This paradox really captures what it means to be a caring human being in the world who stands for values that are eternal, aspirations that are perennial, deeds that are always calling us to enact them in the world. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I, the Lord, you shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the people. That's our calling.